Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope your day and your week are going well so far. We've got a new day, which of course means a new NBA player prop video to share with you guys. And I've got a shit ton of picks to hand out to make up for the fact that we haven't had a video since last Saturday. I've got 8 straight props and then a 3-leg parlay to close out the video. So a ton of props that I have to hand out to you for today's video. But before we get into the props, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, drop a comment down below, all that good stuff. We are on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and when you hit that subscribe button down below, we get there just a little bit sooner. So make sure, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, drop a comment down below. Join the Guy Boston Sports community, one of the fastest growing sports betting communities in the world today. So like I said, guys, a lot of props to get to, so let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in with, let's not have this video be 30 minutes long. We don't have a lot of games in tonight's slate, but I just found a lot of value and a lot of props tonight that I really like. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, guys, so for the first game I'm targeting here, I'm actually going to have 3 straight props coming from this same game. There's a lot that I like in this game that I'm excited to share with you guys. We have the New Orleans Pelicans Brooklyn Nets game, which kicks off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. The first prop I'm going to hand out for today's slate, we're going with Zion Williamson of the New Orleans Pelicans under 25.5 points. We'll go ahead and kick this over to the Outlier screen now, guys. You know what Outlier is? They're the best sports betting tool on the market today. Link in the description below. You get a 7-day free trial to try it out for yourself. You will not regret it. It truly is the best sports betting tool on the market. All right, so here we go. Zion Williamson under 25.5 points. You see right here, this is a DraftKings exclusive. That this line, we get to at minus 135 odds. You see here the data, 6 of his last 10 games, he's cashed this under. And I know each of his last 4 games he's cashed the over, but before you guys freak out, remember, look at who they're playing. So their last game they played Portland, not a very good defensive team. Then they played the Clippers, who are pretty good defensively, but they've been kind of banged up. And honestly, actually, I shouldn't say they're very good defensively because of late the Clippers defense has kind of been a bit of a train wreck. So that's another game there. Then you have the Cleveland Cavaliers without Evan Mobley, so that's a big impact there. And then you also have Atlanta, who all around are one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. I always say about superstars, honestly, defensive matchups, they only matter so much because when you're a superstar, you can go above those matches, but especially when you're in a good defensive matchup with a superstar, they're definitely going to cash. So that's really what it is. 4 great defensive matchups in a row for Zion. But you see before that, he'd covered that in 6 straight games prior to that. And you look at his last 20 games in general, a 55% hit rate, 11 of his last 20 games, he's cashed the under. And on the 2023 season as a whole, a 63% hit rate, 35 out of 56 games this year, he has cashed his under. So it's not like this is a rare thing for him. He cashes this under the majority of the time. And if you look at the head-to-head matchup, each of the last 2 times he's faced off with the Brooklyn Nets, he has cashed this under, including the one time they played this season. Back on January 2nd, he had just 10 points in a blowout win for the Pelicans. He only played 25, just shy of 26 minutes, but he only finished with 10 points in that game. I can't really imagine if he played an extra 5 minutes or so that it would equal out to him scoring an extra 16 points. That's the thing to remember with Zion. He doesn't play a ton of minutes. His average on the season is just about shy of 31 minutes. And you see here of late now, he has been playing a little bit more of late. But overall, he's averaging only 30 minutes, 31 minutes a game this season that he gets his work done. So it's not like we have to worry about him too much unless it's a really tight game, him playing north of 35 minutes. But look, the reason why I love this prop the most for Zion is the defensive matchup here. You see here, the Brooklyn Nets on the season have been the best defensive team in the NBA in terms of points allowed against the power forward position, giving up just 21.7 points per game to opposing power forwards. So overall, this is the best defensive team in the NBA against power forwards. Zion, and you saw it the last time he played in almost 26 minutes. I know it was a blowout, but in 26 minutes, he only had 10 points. So a really good defensive matchup for us here. He's been playing a lot of minutes lately. I do think New Orleans will probably roll here. The Pelicans are 7.5-point favorites tonight, and the total is only set at 216, so it's not a very high total. I don't see Zion having a massive game against a really good defensive matchup here. I think he cashes this under. I still think he'll probably score somewhere in that vicinity of maybe around 20 points, but for Zion to score 26 points in this game or more, I just don't see it for today's slate. I think there's some other guys on the Pelicans who could have bigger days. And that's a nice segue into our second prop for today's slate. We have Brandon Ingram in the same game. We have Brandon Ingram over 19.5 points for the Pelicans. Like I said, I don't think Zion Williamson is going to be the guy who goes off for New Orleans tonight. I think it could potentially be Brandon Ingram. The biggest problem with a game like this is obviously blowout potential, but like I've said before, a team like Brooklyn, they don't really have anything to lose for. They don't own their own draft pick. So tanking is out of the question. I know they're not a playoff team. They're pretty bad, but for Brooklyn, there's really no point in them trying to lose. The only benefit for them is to try and win. They've got a lot of fringe players, guys who are trying to make their place in the league, a guy like Cam Thomas, for example. Some of these players, Mikal Bridges, who are trying to establish themselves as either stars or key players. And so I think that there is something to be said that I think that they're going to play hard regardless of their circumstances. This isn't a situation like a team like Detroit or a team like Utah, I think, is a perfect example of a team that now they're actively, I think, trying to tank, and you can see it in their performances. Brooklyn's going to play hard because they have what else can they do, right? But to play hard. There's no benefit to them losing. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, no one can know it's going to be a blowout. The line is 7.5 points. I think New Orleans is a better team. The last time they played, New Orleans did beat the brakes off of them. But I think Brandon Ingram, even in a blowout potential, I think he should be able to get 20 points here. The data is decent. He's cashed in 6 of his last 10 games. You look at his last 20, and it's a 55% hit rate, 11 of his last 20. Not bad. You see, he kind of teeters around this, but he falls just short sometimes. But on the 2023 season as a whole, a 56% hit rate, 34 out of 61 games this year, he has cashed this over. You look at the head-to-head matchup, the last 2 times they played, now back in October of 2022, he had 28 points in a blowout win for the Pelicans. The one time they played this year, back on January 2nd, he only had 12 points in 25 minutes. So that is a little bit alarming here, but the matchup is just too good to pass up on. On the season, the Brooklyn Nets are the 3rd worst team in the NBA in terms of points allowed to the small forward position. And although their last 10, 15 games or so, according to Fantasy Pros, they're actually getting a little bit better defensively, it's still not good. They're still bottom 10 in the NBA in terms of points allowed to the small forward position. So overall, this is a really great defensive matchup for Brandon Ingram. He hasn't been covering it a ton of late, but Brandon Ingram is a superstar on any given night. He can go off. Again, I just don't think Zion's going to have a big night tonight. I think exploiting this defensive matchup right here is key. I think Brandon Ingram has a massive game tonight. I don't think Brooklyn will be able to slow him down. I think 20 points is the bare minimum I think he can get. Again, if you're feeling ballsy, you could go even higher. I'm going to take the 20-point line, but I would even be comfortable with taking an alternate and a plus money value. Something like 21.5 or plus 130 is not bad at all. I think Brandon Ingram could have a very big game tonight. Again, the biggest risk here is blowout. Will he play more than 25 minutes? But Brooklyn's going to play tough. The line is 7.5. It's a small point total, but I do think Brandon Ingram will cash this line. All right, guys, my third and final prop from this slate, we have Mikal Bridges of the Brooklyn Nets under 22.5 points plus rebounds. I promise this is the last prop I'm giving out for this Nets-Pelicans game. But I love this spot here. This might actually be my favorite one. This one or the Zion one, my favorite of the 3 here for this game. Mikal Bridges, you see here, he's cashed this under in 8 of his last 10 games. You stretch that data to his last 20, 14 of his last 20. It's a 70% hit rate. And on the 2023 season as a whole, a 43% hit rate. Not very great, but you see a lot of his cashes were early in the year. He has really cooled off of late. And look at the head-to-head matchup. The one time they played this year on January 2nd, he had 13 points and 3 rebounds in 29 minutes played. He's been on a trend of covering this a lot lately. He's not really the main shot taker, which is very weird on this team. You would think that Bridges would be the guy they go to, but it's more been like Schroeder and Cam Thomas and other guys taking more of the shots than Bridges. He, again, look at his last 20 games. It's a 70% hit rate, 14 of his last 20 games. He had a couple outliers, like versus Atlanta, he had 38 points. That's just a great defensive matchup. You see he has a couple games here and there against some suspect defenses. But overall, for the most part, he does not do a lot of scoring for this team. And you mix that with the fact that New Orleans, you look at the defensive rankings on the right side of the screen here, they are a top 10 defense in the NBA against the small forward position in both points allowed and rebounds allowed. It's a great defensive matchup. They shut down small forwards. And you mix that with the fact that Bridges doesn't really do a whole ton of scoring in general. I really like this prop. And if you focus on the head-to-head data a little closer, the Pelicans have the second best defense over the last 10 games against the small forward position. They're only giving up 16 points in total against opposing small forwards over their last 10 games. So this Pelicans defense has been shutting down small forwards left and right, and I think it'll stay the same with Mikal Bridges here. All right, guys, finally moving on to a different game, the fourth prop I'm giving you out for the straight prop segment of today's video. We're targeting the Rockets-Wizards game, which kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going with Fred VanVleet of the Houston Rockets over 28.5 points plus assists. The data is not the best on the season view, but of late, it's not fantastic, but it's not horrible. In 5 of his last 10 games, he's cashes over. You see, he just misses the mark a lot of the time. In his last 20 games, yeah, not fantastic. 2023 season, not fantastic. So the data is not fantastic on this one, but what I'm going for here is the head-to-head matchup. The last time these two teams played just last week, Fred VanVleet had 27 points and 9 assists. In a blowout win for the Rockets. He had a massive game, and he played about 37 minutes in that game. The Washington Wizards are a mess. They're one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. Versus point guards, overall, you look at the right side of the screen here, they are literally give up the most points in the NBA and the second most assists in the NBA. And versus point guards, they give up the third most assists and the 10th most points. The injuries for both sides are pretty significant. For the Rockets, obviously, no Eason, no Şengün, no Whitmore, no Adams. Obviously, we know all that, which obviously gives up more opportunities for VanVleet, more shot opportunities. On the Wizards side of it, they have so many guys out. No Denny, no Bagley, no Coulibaly, no Tyus Jones. Kuzma's probably not going to play. He's a game-time decision. They have so many guys out. Now, this screams blowout, and I understand that, but it also has a pretty high point total here in this game. Vegas is expecting points to be scored. I see that point total, and like I said, Vegas doesn't just set the lines for no reason. This game has the second highest over/under for the slate of today's games, set at over/under 228 points. I see that line. I know with the Wizards, all the injuries they have, they are not scoring. Those points are not coming from Washington. It's going to come from Houston, and I do think that Fred VanVleet here, they like to beat up on these smaller teams. It's been kind of the trend this year. They leave their guys in matchups like this. So I think VanVleet could have a pretty big game here against Washington. The Rockets, they're 3 games out of a play-in spot, so you kind of question, are they really trying to win? What's the situation? I think they're still trying to make that play-in, and only 3 games out from where the Golden State is. I know Golden State's hot. Listen, there's still enough time for Houston to catch up a little bit, but they have to take advantage of matchups like this. I think this is obviously like a must-win spot for them if they want to make the play-in. And so with that being said, with the matchup they have, I think VanVleet plays enough where he should be able to catch the line. He almost cashed this in points alone last week. But he is unbelievable. His assist numbers, too. You see he had 15 potential assists the last time he played. He finished with 9 assists. I think the same will be true in today's game. All right, guys, moving right along, we have the Mavericks-Spurs game next, which kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I've got 2 props to share with you for this game. The first one I'm going to share with you guys is Daniel Gafford over 11.5 points plus assists. A lot more green on this prop than the last Fred VanVleet prop. 6 of his last 10 games, he's cashed this over. You go ahead and look at the last 12 of his last 20 games, a 60% hit rate. And on the 2023 season as a whole, a 57% hit rate, 35 out of 61 games this year, he's cashed this over. When you look at the head-to-head match, the last time he faced off with San Antonio as a member of the Dallas Mavericks, that's the important thing here. Remember, he got traded to Dallas at the trade deadline. He had 10 points and 2 assists, so he did cash this line for Dallas. The last time they played San Antonio, that was very early I think that might have actually been his first game with Dallas, to be honest with you. But Daniel Gafford here, great matchup. I know he's listed as a power forward, but he does play center for the Mavericks. And the San Antonio Spurs are the worst defensive team in the NBA against centers in terms of points allowed. He's going to cash this pretty much only in points. We throw the assists in there because the line's lower than his points plus rebounds prop. And the thing is, he threw in 2 assists the last time they played. He might toss in an assist or 2, which could help us get there. You still look at his points plus rebound. The line goes up to 18.5. I would be a lot more comfortable taking that 11.5 point line with the points plus assists line. Again, defensively, they're the worst defensive team in the NBA against centers. Centers go off on them defensively. I think Gafford will probably do the same. He had 10 points the last time they played, but again, that was very early on in his Mavericks tenure. You see of late, he's had a couple big games. He had 19 points versus OKC. He had 20 points for Chicago. Those are 2 teams that are pretty bad defensively versus centers. So I think you kind of have a similar situation here where you have a really good defensive matchup, a team that's not very good at defending big men. And I think Gafford will 100% take advantage of that. I would grab this as soon as you're watching this clip right now, go on your sportsbook and grab this line because it's already. I was doing my video prep this morning and the line was at 10.5. Now it jumped up to 11.5. So the public is finding this bet out and they're betting on it. The line's going to keep jumping throughout the day. Probably will go up to as high as 12.5 or 13.5. Bet on it now while you can before it keeps rising up. And the second prop for this slate, we're sticking with the same team, opposite side. We're going PJ Washington of the Dallas Mavericks under 12.5 points plus assists. Now, although the Spurs are very good defensively, very bad defensively versus centers, they're actually very good defensively versus power forward. You see a top 5 defensive team in the NBA against the power forward position in terms of points allowed, giving up just 22.4 points per game to opposing power forwards. And they're about middle of the road and assists allowed to power forwards here. And you look at the PJ Washington data here, he's cashed this in 6 consecutive games for the Dallas Mavericks. You look at even his last 11 of his last 20 games. And the last time these 2 teams played, back on February 14th, he had 3 points and 2 assists and just, Sorry about that. In about 28 minutes played. Again, the same applies to Daniel Gafford as it does here. I think that was his first game with the Mavericks coming over from that trade. So take that with a grain of salt. That was very early on in his Mavericks tenure. He wasn't yet fine-tuned with the team yet. He's now been there for over a month. But again, the data still shows 6 straight games he has cashed this under here. And again, with that defensive matchup here, you got Wembanyama going over, blocking shots. I don't see P.J. Washington having a pretty big offensive game. I like this prop a lot, and you see here the value is pretty decent. Minus 120 on DraftKings is available on every sportsbook minus FanDuel. But a pretty good prop here. Next up, we're going with Hornets Magic. We're going with Micic again. I know I bet this on Saturday's video, and it did not hit, but we're going to ride with it again. Over 11.5 points. We're getting this at minus 130 on DraftKings, but if you're betting on other sportsbooks, it's available on pretty much every sportsbook except for I don't see Prize Picks on here. But pretty good value here, over 11.5 points. Again, he's covered it in 7 of his last 10 games for the Hornets. He's been playing a lot of minutes of late. You see here consistently, he's been averaging over his last 10 games 30 minutes a game, but of late, really playing a lot of minutes. Like on that game loss versus Philadelphia, where we had that number, he played 33 minutes, so we were correct on that point. He just didn't score enough, finished just a point shy of covering that line. But again, the Hornets have a lot of injuries, a lot of guys out, and somebody needs to score here. The Magic are a very good defensive team. Micic is going to play, regardless of a blowout or not, he's going to play at least 30 minutes, like I said on Saturday's video. There's no reason why they're going to sit him and rest him. They're not playing for the playoffs. They're not playing for a play-in spot. He's not a superstar that needs rest. He's a fringe roster guy who's trying to make his mark in this league and trying to kind of make a name for himself so he can stick around the league long enough. And so he's going to take advantage. He's going to play as many minutes as he possibly can. There's going to be no rest for Micic. And that's the beautiful thing about a player like him is that he's going to play at least 30 minutes. Even in a blowout scenario, he's going to play. You look at the head-to-head matchup. He has faced off with Orlando recently back on March 5th. He had 21 points, and again, the Hornets got beat. Not a massive blowout, but it was still a 12-point loss, and he had 21 points versus them. So I think it's a pretty good spot here. Over 11.5 points. Pretty good odds. Again, minus 130 on DraftKings. Minus 120, minus 130 on FanDuel. Pretty good value here. Over 11.5 points for Micic. All right, guys, we have made to the final prop of our straight prop segment. Comment 17 down below if you've made it this far into the video because we just hit the 17-minute mark in the video. And again, as always, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Our final prop for our straight prop segment, we're going with the Nuggets-Timberwolves game. We're going with Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets over 25.5 points. This line is available on FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm getting it on DraftKings at minus 135 odds, minus 128 on FanDuel. He's cashed this in 5 of his last 10 games. And on the 2023 season as a whole, a 59% hit rate, 39 out of 66 games this year, Jokic has cashed this over. When you look at the head-to-head matchup, 4 of his last 9 games versus Minnesota, he's cashed the over. Not a fantastic hit rate. The one time he's played them this year back in November, he just missed the mark. He had 25 points in what was a blowout win for Minnesota. This is one of those props where the data is not what really drove me to this pick. It's more the circumstances. Jokic coming off a really bad game on Sunday versus the Dallas Mavericks. They lost off that incredible buzzer beater to Kyrie Irving. If you didn't watch that game, it was a fantastic game. He only had 16 points. He honestly looked like he was like sleepwalking a little bit. Looked like he was out of it. Very strange game from Jokic. I don't think he's going to follow up that kind of a performance with another bad one here. In a very big game. These are 2 of the top teams in the Western Conference. Obviously, they're all kind of fighting for those top seeds in the West. Pretty big game here. The Timberwolves are on the second night of a back-to-back. Obviously, no Towns. Naz Reid and Gobert are both on the injury report for tonight's game. You look over here on the right side of the screen. Rudy Gobert game time decision with left rib sprain. I think he'll probably play. And Naz Reid just listed as a head injury. He's listed as a game time decision. I don't know. I'm assuming as of right now that they're both going to play. Even still, I think this is one of those games where, yes, I know Gobert defensively is fantastic. I just think that Jokic in a game like this, coming off a horrible performance this last game, I don't envision him following that up with another dud here. And a game that actually does have implications for the playoffs, like for the seeding. Minnesota and Denver, they're right there at the top of the leaderboards there in the Western Conference. So I do think that Jokic in these kind of games will step up. And Minnesota defensively, they're arguably the best defensive team in the NBA. Not just against size, they're also very good defensively on the perimeter. So guys like Jamal Murray, guys like Michael Porter Jr., we don't know how they're going to fare here today. Overall in the season, you see Minnesota, they are a top 10 team defensively in terms of points allowed to the center position. It is also worth noting that over the last 7 games since the Karl-Anthony Towns injury, defensively, Minnesota has not been that stout versus centers. Now, I know on the season it shows here they are ranked one of the best defensive teams in the NBA versus centers, But of the last 7 games, they are a bottom half team in the league in terms of points allowed, giving up over 22 points per game. So almost 5 points more per game over the last 7 games than what their season average is. So since Karl Towns went down, you can see defensively they have not been as good. Jokic, again, one of those superstars who can overcome those defensive matchups. I just think Jokic is due for a pretty big performance here. I'm not saying he's going to have 40. I'm not saying he's going to have a massive. I'm saying that, I could see him having, a 27, 28, 30-point game here versus a Minnesota team that they're still holding strong for the most part, but they are banged up. Especially without Karl Towns around. And on the second night of a back-to-back, I could see Gobert maybe struggling a little bit to match up with Jokic. All right, guys, now going ahead and switching over to our parlay segment of today's video here. We have our player prop parlay. Again, I know it's a longer video. We already hit the 20-minute mark here. I've got a 3-leg parlay to share with you guys. Some of the picks do overlap with the picks that we already gave, so we won't have to spend too much time on the data. But here we go, guys. Closing out the video strong. 3-leg parlay. Let's get after it. Let's go ahead and jump back into the outlier screen here. The first leg of our 3-leg parlay, we're sticking with that exact same pick I just gave you, just an alternate line. We're going with Nikola Jokic over 24.5 points. So we're slicing 2 points off of this line. Excuse me, slicing 1 point off of this line. Sorry about that. I know a lot of people are saying, what's the big difference to slice go from 25.5, which is what the original pick was, down to 24.5. But you actually look at the data, it changes. So you look here, you can see here on my screen, 60% over 5 games, 50% over the last 20, 59 in the season, 44% head-to-head, all that stuff. You switch that to 24, you shave 1 point off, and all of a sudden, 60, 60, 56, and a 68%. It jumps from, again, just real quick to show you guys, at 25.5, 59% hit rate, to 24.5, a 68% hit rate. So it does change the data quite a bit. You look at the head-to-head now, he goes from 4 of his last 9 to 5 of his last 9. Again, it's not a big deal, but it does help a little bit, and it makes the data a little bit stronger. Listen, there is a world where he just finishes with 25 points and we missed the mark by 1. This is kind of insurance for that. I do believe Jokic is going to have a big game. This is why I'm putting this in the parlay. I'm doubling down on my thoughts here. I do think Nikola Jokic will have a pretty big scoring performance here versus Minnesota. So I'm going to stick with that, and we're going to ride that out for the first leg of our 3-leg parlay. All right, for our second leg, we're going back to that Pelicans-Nets game. I know I gave out so many picks already for that game, but we're going back to it one more time, going back to that well once more. We're going with Zion Williamson under 26.5 points. Again, kind of the same thing that Jokic prop. We got this originally at 25.5. We added an extra point onto it to make it 26.5. All it does is it decreases the odds. We get this now at minus 165 on DraftKings. Similarly to the Jokic one I just showed you, what is adding a point do? You see here our original line was 25.5. You see here 55% hit rate his last 20, only 20% his last 5 games, 63% hit rate on the year. You add that to 26.5. Now all of a sudden, 65% over his last 20 games, 40% over his last 5. You see here, he now cashes in this game instead of not cashing, and a 73% hit rate on the year. It adds up 10% to what was already a strong bet. So adding that 1 extra point does make a heck of the difference in the data here. And all we do is we add an extra, now it's minus 165 instead of, excuse me one second, instead of the one, so we added like 30 points in odd value. You know what I mean? Like it went from minus 135 to minus 165. Not a massive change in the odds, but the data does change a significant amount, enough that I think it does make a difference. So that's the second leg of our 3-leg parlay. And again, I love that defensive match here. Brooklyn versus power forwards, man. They are really, really good. All right, guys, third leg of our 3-leg parlay is the riskiest leg in my opinion, but one, it's so tough not to trust this guy. We're going with Luka Doncic in that Mavericks Spurs game over 29.5 points. Again, the data is so strong, it's hard not to want to take this line every game. He's cashed this in 8 of his last 10 games. Look at his last 20, 15 of his last 20 games. You see when he misses, he just barely misses. On the 2023 season as a whole, a 76% hit rate. That's crazy that 45 out of his 59 games this year, he scored 30 or more points. That really is insane from Luka. And you look at the head-to-head matchup, 3 of the last 5 times he's faced off with San Antonio, he's cashed this line. The last time they played on February 14th, he just missed it. He had 27 points, but he has cashed this line in 2 out of the 3 times he's played them this year. They are the second worst defensive team in the NBA versus the shooting guard position, which is what I kind of consider Luka. I know he kind of plays some point, plays some small forward. He's really weird. I know he's listed as a point guard, but he kind of plays as a shooting guard, but he's also kind of a small forward. It's weird, but I consider him as a shooting guard here, which they are one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA, and even versus point guards. Whether you want to put him as a point guard or a shooting guard, they are horrible defensively versus those 2 positions. Great defensive matchup, a ton of green. That's what we love to see for our player props. That's the third and final leg of today's parlay. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and move my screen over now. There's our 3-leg ticket. Quick recap here because we're just about to hit 25 minutes here in the video. Zion Williamson under 26.5 points. Luka Doncic over 29.5 points. And Nikola Jokic over 24.5 points. Your parlay, all three of those are going to get a parlay of plus 281 odds. Not too bad. Guys, that is it for me today. Thank you very much for watching. As always, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, drop a comment down below, all that good stuff. Again, thank you very much. I know the video is longer, but I wanted to make up for not having a couple of videos. So I threw a ton of props at you guys, gave you 8 straight props, 3 parlay props, tons of action for what is relatively a small slate. But I do think we found a good amount of value there. So guys, that is it for me. Until tomorrow, I hope we're all winners. Have a good one, guys.